So I'm Phillip Gibson. I work for the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and specifically, I'm the state radon coordinator. I'm a staff of one. My supervisor, Catherine Rossfjord, who is also in Western North Carolina, used to have my position, but she's also over the tanning program and does other administrative functions within radiation protection. So I'm the point of contact, and a lot of what I do is empower citizens, but also empowering other organizations with information to assist residents, North Carolinians. There is a person like me in every state and tribal community in the country. And the majority of us, if not all of us, are funded through a federal grant that comes from the Environmental Protection Agency. So the North Carolina Radon Program is completely funded by EPA and has been so for 20 plus years. There is funding at the national level that supports state programs like ours, and that there is a person like me that does maybe the same or different work to reach consumers within their state or tribal community. So we have a number of videos and brochures and things like that that I'm going to share with you as a part of the slideshow or this presentation. And just know that they are all available for you to utilize in your own social media, in your own meetings, whatever you may do in the world of lung cancer prevention. So one of those is this new 1-minute public service announcement. And it sort of sets the groundwork of what is radon and the issue around radon. So I'm going to start my presentation with this video.
Two main causes of lung cancer in North Carolina are smoking tobacco and breathing high levels of radon. The North Carolina Radon Program wants you to know about the importance of testing for radon in your home and how to get radon levels in your home reduced. Everyone is at risk for radon-inducing lung cancer. 3 groups of people are more sensitive. Children whose lungs are still developing may be 2 times more sensitive to radon than adults. People who have smoked more than 100 cigarettes in their life are 10 times more sensitive to radon than non-smokers. And people who are lung cancer survivors are more sensitive to radon gas. Visit the North Carolina Radon Program website at radon.ncdhhs.gov. If you are outside of North Carolina, see the National Radon Program website at sosradon.org.
So what I'm going to share with you today is what and where is radon? And that's a very broad question. Why is radon a health concern? And I do want to emphasize that there is no public health standard for radon exposure. So it is about what is your risk, what is your tolerance for that risk, and how do you prevent radon-induced, lower your risk for radon-induced lung cancer. Why is it a health concern? How to test for radon? What are the recommendations for mitigation of radon? So if you have a particular level, what does that mean to you? What are the components of a mitigation system? I'll briefly go into that so that you have awareness about what does a system look like in trying to reduce the radon level in your building, your home, and how you can actually evaluate the system that you're going to get. It's really about consumer awareness and consumer protection at that point. So I want you to be empowered with information that when you hire a certified professional, you know what to expect from them. And then lastly is the available resources. Of course, everything that we provide for education in North Carolina is applicable in every other state and tribal community, because what we do in North Carolina is what I would consider to be basic information. We have no laws, rules, or regulations in North Carolina as it pertains to radon testing or mitigation, any of that. So you could consider what I'm providing as sort of a foundation for the issue. And then you'll want to check in to see what your state is doing. Some states like Illinois have a regulatory component that's really managing the certified professionals within the state. So it's not requiring homeowners to test or mitigate. There are other states and tribal communities that do various things. So just to give you context, since many of you all may not be in North Carolina. So the way I look at radon, and one of the things that I do when I educate real estate brokers about radon, is I recognize that there are a lot of indoor air quality issues that a homeowner or consumer or renter may be concerned with. So some of these you may have dealt with before. Certainly in North Carolina, a carbon monoxide detector is required, smoke detectors are required, so forth. But radon testing is not required. But it should be something that every consumer think of when they're not just buying a home, but as they're living in that home. So there's a period of time that we recommend every 2 years that you test your home for radon, because things can change. And that'll become more evident as I get into the source of radon and how it increases or decreases. Radon is a radioactive particle. It is generated by the natural decay process of uranium. And uranium is found naturally in all rock and soil at varying levels around the globe. So this is just a natural phenomenon or a natural process. So uranium exists as it decays, which takes millions upon millions of years for it to begin decaying. But as it decays, it's releasing radioactive particles from the ground. As that gas becomes available by surfacing, coming to the surface of the land, then our buildings take over in terms of vacuuming or drawing in or sucking in the gas. And it is that which plays a big role in trying to increase the radon, not trying to, but does increase the radon level concentration in your home. So what I want you to note out of that is that it's a natural phenomenon. Radon is emanating from the ground. And so we are exposed to radon in pretty much every environment that we're in at varying levels. So we assume a natural outdoor level of around 0.4 picocuries per liter. That level is probably not going to mean anything yet to you, but it will become clear as we go on. But that's a very low level, and it's a level that you really can't lower because it's the outdoor exposure. Now, other areas of the country, of the world, may have higher outdoor levels because of the amount of uranium that is found in those areas, like Nevada or the southwestern part of the United States. Naturally, there's a lot more uranium, and so the outdoor level may be a bit higher than that 0.4 average across the country. So it's a radioactive particle that we breathe in. We also exhale it. But if in the decay process, it releases the burst of energy that's required to damage the cells inside of our lungs, then it, like cigarette smoking or other exposures, over time, that damage can result in cancer. I want to note a couple of characteristics about radon, and that is radon is 7 times heavier than oxygen. The reason that's important is because you're going to have a higher concentration of radon at a lower level of a building than a higher level. And then the other thing to note is this half-life of radon. So as uranium decays, it decays into radium and then later into radon. And I'm kind of going into these chunks, if you will. But there's this constant decay process that's happening. And as radon decays, it eventually becomes polonium, or elements of polonium come from that. And that's what we're actually breathing in that's causing this damage to our lungs. So The other point about half-life or the decay process is that radon isn't something that's going to become concentrated in a home and stay concentrated, building up, building up, building up. It's constantly decaying into other elements. Okay. So just you may be already attuned to these factors like alpha, beta, and gamma, but just to say it, alpha is a powerful radioactive particle, but it's weaker than beta and gamma. So if you look at this illustration, it's just trying to note that alpha particle can't go through paper, but a beta can, but it can't go through aluminum. And then gamma, you could think of X-rays, if you will, around gamma. It can go through paper, it can go through aluminum, but not through lead. So when we're talking about radon, we're talking about an alpha particle. So this radioactive particle is not going through our skin. The way it gets into our bodies is by either inhaling it or ingesting it. And ingesting means that it has the potential to also be in private well water, in our groundwater, and that may come through the pipes in your home system, your drinking water, and that's another way that radon can travel into our bodies. I mentioned already the decay process. So again, starting with uranium and then radium and then radon, eventually in this longer decay chain, it'll all end up into lead, if you will. So it's losing energy along the way and it's turning into these other elements. Radon is often confused with carbon monoxide because the characteristics are the same. You can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it. And so oftentimes when I describe radon in that way, people think, oh, I've already got a detector in my home. And often what that really is a carbon monoxide detector. It's a completely different pollutant, if you will. Again, radon primarily comes from the underlying geology. So granite, other rock forms would have uranium in it. That uranium is decaying and releasing radioactive particles. But we quarry rock and we transport it. We turn it into building materials, gypsum, other things, concrete. And if in high quantities in building materials, the building materials may be the source of the radon, not the underlying geology. So you may be in a particular part of your state or your community where there's a low level of uranium. You could still have high radon levels because of the building materials containing uranium, off-gassing, and then the buildings drawing that in. I want to introduce this word radionuclide because it's important when it comes to looking at well water in particular. So if you do have uranium in the ground and your water source, your drinking water source is in contact with that uranium, and the uranium is being released at a level that could create a high level of uranium in your drinking water, that is, then that's something that you will want to measure. And so when I come to this topic, I want to mention that there's levels of uranium, of radium, of radon, and gross alpha and gross beta. So I just mentioned alpha, beta, and gamma a moment ago, but those are the levels that you would want to test if you have private well water. And all of those together are radionuclides. So uranium, radium, radon, so forth. So when you're talking to someone about testing your well water, you may consider a test that would look at radionuclides. This is a more detailed decay chain. So I've already mentioned earlier that we're starting with uranium, radium, radon, and then you'll see the remaining decay chain here. So it's really polonium-218 and polonium-214 that are the radioactive particles that are damaging the lung. So why is it of concern? Well, if what I've said so far isn't already generated concern. So radon is the leading environmental cause of lung cancer among non-smokers. Tobacco is number one. In terms of numbers of deaths in the United States, it's estimated that 21,000 people die each year of radon-induced lung cancer. In North Carolina, you're looking at around 480. And again, those are from algorithms, from predictive models, where those numbers come from. Because like anything else, and you all being lung cancer survivors are probably fully aware of this, is that when someone passes from lung cancer, they're not necessarily pointing to the lung itself and identifying the cause. They're looking at what the person was exposed to. They're looking at what kind of cancer they have, small cell, for example. So no one is looking at the lungs of those who have passed and identifying radon specifically. It's looking at what that person's lifestyle has been, what they've been exposed to, so forth. So when we're talking about risk of lung cancer, there are 4 variables that influence a person's risk. The first 3 have been traditionally and still across the country the main risks. One is the radon level. So that's what you're testing for in a building. And I say a building because it's not just homes, it's schools, it's workplaces, so forth. So there's a lot of focus on residential exposure, but I want to acknowledge that you can be exposed outside of your home. So anyways, when you're testing to find out what is your average level of exposure. So that's risk or variable number 1. The second is the length of time that you're exposed to that average level. So you've tested your home, you've tested for maybe 48 hours, which is the minimum amount of time to test for radon. And then you're making an assumption that that average level from that one test is what you're exposed to on average each year for multiple years. It's not like tobacco, but I want to relate it to that in the sense of you're looking at your exposure over time, right? What is your risk over time? The other variable, third variable, is whether or not you have smoked 100 cigarettes or more ever in your life. So you've probably heard this before, but a person who has smoked 100 cigarettes or more ever in their life are ever smokers. And those who have smoked less than 100 are never smokers, at least in the categories of what I talk about to consumers. So the damage has begun with tobacco smoke, and so it makes your lungs more vulnerable to this radioactive particle, thus increasing your risk. The other variable is whether or not you're a child. Now, I want to point out that this is not an immediate risk for lung cancer, but children's lungs are developing, and if they're exposed to secondhand smoke, then they begin having an additional risk over life, right? So if they're exposed to high levels of radon at an early age while their lungs are developing, then over that lifetime, it may increase their risk. So it's the level of risk is 2 times more susceptible than adults. But that's during the period of their lungs developing. So I'm going to talk about numbers here in a moment with some charts or tables, but I want to kind of give you a visual context of what radon may look like in this invisible world. So there's a thing called a cloud chamber, and that's this box that I'm getting ready to play this video on. This box has alcohol, like isopropyl rubbing alcohol around felt around the perimeter inside this box. And under the box is either dry ice or it may have a refrigerant that is running to make the space inside the box cold. And then a piece of uranium can be put in the middle of the box, or you could visualize what the room itself has in terms of radon. So what this box, this cloud chamber, is going to show is When a radon particle bursts and releases energy, right, it creates a white path or looks like smoke. And this is what's going on around us at some level everywhere. It may be minimal, but for this particular situation, this room has already been measured to have 100 picocuries per liter level in this room. And this is going to show you what 100 picocuries per liter looks like.
Radon is everywhere, even in this classroom. If you look in this cloud chamber, you'll see tracks left by alpha particles from radon atoms that happened to be in the chamber when the lid was put on. Those short, bright streaks you see in there are the radon alphas. Notice that there are only a few alpha trails in the chamber at any time. This is a very low level of radon that we don't need to worry about. But in certain parts of the country, there are houses with a lot of radon in their basements. What would the cloud chamber look like in one of these basements? This basement has been measured with a radon level of 100 picocuries per liter. Come look at this.
Oh my God. My bed is radioactive.
So again, that's just meant to give you a visual
anything like that.
Of what is happening in this space that we're breathing in, right? So there's going to be some radon level in all of your homes. You won't know what your level is until you test. And then there are ways to mitigate or lower that radon level. In North Carolina, historically, people have thought just Western North Carolina and a few other counties would have high radon levels. And that is due to a lack of information in the past. It is a false, it's not true. So we've learned over time with additional data that high radon levels are found throughout North Carolina. So when looking at this map, the red indicates counties where at least one test has measured 4 picocuries per liter or more. Orange, 2 to 4, or 3.9, if you will. And the gray areas are, we have minimal or no data. No testing that we're aware of has occurred. Now, 4 is not a magic number, but it is the number in which there is a recommendation where we say we strongly recommend that you mitigate your home to lower the radon level below 4. But I want to note that EPA and CDC and every other state and tribal community also say that if your radon level is between 2 and say 3.9, still consider mitigation, but talk with the certified mitigator about whether or not they can actually lower the level. But if it's 4 or more, we strongly recommend that you hire a certified radon mitigator to help you lower that level. So this is from test kit data. So when a consumer has tested their home, one of the 5 national labs or manufacturers of test kits has conducted the analysis, and we as a state have collected that data from those 5 test kit companies and then got it at a zip code level. So that's what this is displaying. We also have geological data that talks about or shows us where there's susceptibility for radon in groundwater. So there are 61 counties in North Carolina that we've identified as potentially having high levels of radionuclides. It may be just uranium, it may be radium, gross alpha, gross beta, radon. But our point is that if you live in one of these 61 counties, first test your air, and if you have a high radon level, consider testing also your well water. I want to note to you that there is a map that exists for every state called a zone map. And this was data that was collected in the late 80s, early 90s to help guide state government, local governments with information to help them understand where to focus limited resources, staff, money, so forth, on this subject that at that time in the late 80s, early 90s, became evident that this was an issue that they'd want to get involved in, right? So health departments like ours. For North Carolina, it started off with the Cooperative Extension Service, began educating people about radon, what was a new topic, if you will. The map was never intended to be used to help consumers define their risk for radon-induced lung cancer. But over time, it's been used for that and is still used for that. In North Carolina, I'm trying hard to make sure that people don't use this map because it could make you have a high level of concern or no concern based on what color your county is. And the point is that everybody just needs to test their building. I'll just point out Mecklenburg County in Charlotte area. So there are, well, per this map, it's saying that in yellow, the likelihood is that your building would have a level of under 2 picocuries per liter. Well, we know that there are a number of high-rise, mid-rise condominium buildings that have been built with high levels of radon in Mecklenburg County. If you just looked at this map, you may never test your home. It may keep you from doing so because it gives you a false sense of security, right? Likewise, in Buncombe County, which I live here in Macon County, Western North Carolina, but in Buncombe County, I have consumers who call me moving to the state, alarmed that they want to move to Asheville, but they don't want to be in a high radioactive area. And my point to them is that you won't know if there's a high levels of radon in the home that you want to buy or live in until you test. So don't take this map as being deciding factor for where you're going to live and how you're going to live. Everybody wants a predictor. I can say that the only predictive element that I can give people is this data point that comes from CDC, EPA, is that we know that 1 in 15 homes in the United States has a high level of radon, meaning 4 picocuries per liter or more. So everybody wants a predictor. What about this neighborhood? What about this subdivision? What about this building? So forth. And my point is, only not only, but 1 in 15 homes may have a high level of radon. So go ahead and just test. So I've talked about radon. It comes from uranium. Uranium is decaying. It's being released, and it comes to the surface. And then the building itself is then the driving force of increasing the concentration inside the home. So how does it get in there? Well, we have cracks in our floors. We have construction joints where the wall and the floor meet. We have a lot of cavities around in the walls themselves. You have conduit and plumbing and so forth, where that's all entering into the home. And those voids, or even how small they may be, are pathways for that radon to be drawn in or through into your home. The video I showed you with the radon alpha particles shooting, he said basement, and I don't want you to get the notion that only homes with basements can have high levels of radon. It can be any home type. So a home with a basement, a home built on a slab on grade, homes with crawl spaces, even manufactured homes with skirting around them. The reason I say that about skirting is that obviously if there's no skirting or protection around the perimeter at the base, then air is going to flow through that. It's going to dilute the radon that is coming up from the ground and be less likely to draw in and create high levels of radon inside your home. There's a little ditty that I say a lot, which is dilution is a solution to radon pollution. So this space under the manufactured home kind of falls into that category. In North Carolina, particularly in Western North Carolina, we have tree houses. Literally, there are homes, really nice, $500,000 and up homes that are built inside of as a treehouse, right? And so there's obviously not a connection to the ground, so it's not necessarily going to draw in gases. I would say those might have other problems later on, but not a radon problem. You've probably heard that heat rises, right? And there is a suction that happens with every building. So it's drawing gases inward based on a number of variables. One being heat rises. Also, when high winds are pushing against your home, that may create more of a vacuum effect of your building. There are appliances in our homes that draw gases inward. So it could be, the fan in the bathroom or the fan in the kitchen, if it's connected to the outside, that is. And then older homes, like where I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky, we also had an attic fan. They aren't used as much now, but there are still attic fans obviously out there. So that appliance can actually draw gases from the ground into the home itself. So that's how it gets in and what's the driving force behind that. And then if we have a high concentration of radon in our homes, it increases what damage is going to occur in our lungs from this radioactive particle. I don't think that you need to be advised of this. This is just another slide that I provide general consumers to understand that smoking and secondhand smoke is a driving force around lung cancer. Certainly genetics have a big role. And so there are people who are genetically more susceptible to cancers than others. Something that you already know. And radon gas and other pollutants can actually exacerbate or increase your risk. And it may be playing not on a smoker or a former smoker, but the genetics that we all have, and whether or not you're genetically more susceptible. Then also trying to communicate about what are the signs of lung cancer, communicating that. I've mentioned already that there is not a public health standard for radon. There certainly is simply recommendations that I've mentioned already. If your level is between 2 and 4, we ask you to consider mitigation, but if it's 4 or more, then we strongly recommend that you have your home mitigated. In North Carolina, we also have a rule that the real estate agent, or in our state, we call them brokers, is required to do, and that is if a home has been tested voluntarily, because there's no requirement for testing, and the level of radon in the home is at 4 picocuries per liter or more on average over a time frame of 48 hours of testing, then that level becomes a material fact. Material facts are things like the home has mold or the foundation is cracked, or, so severe issues. So radon at 4 picocuries per liter or more is regarded as a material fact in North Carolina. And what that does is it requires the real estate broker to communicate that to all people involved in that real estate transaction. It's really important because it gives consumers then advisement about what their risk could be. It also becomes a negotiation tool as to who's going to mitigate the home, or if the consumer decides, I don't want to live here. But when people call me for advice, my recommendation is if it's a home that you want to live in, radon mitigation can lower the radon level. There's very few times when mitigation does not work. So I'm going to, at the end of my presentation with the slides, take you to our website and show you the resources that are available. One of those resources is this healthcare provider's guide. So we work to educate family practice physicians, oncologists, oncology nurse practitioners, people who would come in contact with the general public to help communicate this issue. And this guide, this national guide that EPA was involved with, this CRCPD. It's an organization that's made up of people like myself in state or government positions around radiation. And in that booklet, it shows this chart. It used to be that it was measured or shown in how many people per 1,000, and the table changed in this last iteration to how many people per 100,000 are at risk. So I'm going to use the 1,000 because that's what's drilled into my head. I haven't drilled the 100,000 into my head yet. But the point is that at a level of 4 picocuries per liter, so if that's your average level that you're exposed to over a lifetime, then for a never smoker, your risk is 7 out of 1,000, or in the case of this, it's 730 out of 100,000. Okay. But for a person who is an ever smoker, your risk goes from 7 out of 1,000 to 62 out of 1,000, or 6,200 out of 100,000. So this is just to kind of give you a baseline of risk, right? So what is your risk? If radon-induced lung cancer was listed as a part of the cancer mortality listings that come out at a national level, then radon would be in the top 10. Right now, it's part of this number for lung and bronchus cancer type. So it's folded into that. But if it was separated at that 21,000 number nationally, then we're looking at within the top 10. So testing for radon. So you can test your own home with what I would call a disposable test kit. You should have confidence in test kits that have been evaluated at a national level. And on our website, we have those 5 test kit companies and their test kits so that you could identify that, right? So you could shop if you want to. What a lot of people do is they want to hire someone to do that work. A test kit should cost you no more than around $17 to $20, depending on the kit that you purchase. If you hire somebody, in North Carolina, it costs somewhere around $150 to $200 for them to come and test. And they may test with a disposable test kit, or they may test with basically a computer, a continuous radon monitor, and it'll measure for 3 days, and then they'll take the 48 hours out of that. They all should be following, and this is nationally, they should all be following the ANSI-ARST standards. ARST is the professional organization that creates these standards. ANSI, which is the American National Standards Institute, does the approval, if you will, the certification of those standards. So for consumer protection, if you do hire somebody, ask them if they're following the ANSI-ARST standards. Put that in the contract or the agreement that you've got with them. These are just some visuals of what that might look like. The test kit on the right is the one that we give away in January. We are out of the test kits that we were given away in January, but this is from AirCheck, which is a North Carolina-based company. There's one in Florida, there's ProLab, there's one in Texas, AccuStar, or Alpha Energy rather, there's AccuStar and some others. Continuous radon monitors, they all look different. There's so many different brands out there. This is just one visual. Where do you test? You want to test on the lowest level of your home in which you live. So let me clarify that even more so. If you have a home with a crawl space, you're going to test on the first floor. If you have a home with a slab on grade, you're going to test on the first floor. If you have a home with a basement, the question you should ask yourself is, do I live in this basement? Or is it just simply storage? If you live there, as in an office, a bedroom, something like that, then that's a livable space, no matter if it's heated or not, and you'll want to test that space. You don't want to test in the bathroom or the kitchen because of the appliance issues, and certainly not the closet because no one should be living in the closet. Some people have even tested in the crawl space. And of course, I ask a silly question intentionally, which is who lives in the crawl space? So you're not just testing for the presence of radon, but what you're exposed to. A lot of this I've already mentioned, about 48 hours. You can test any time of the year. We suggest testing in the winter months because you normally have your windows and doors closed. It doesn't mean that you can't go in and out of your home, but a closed home condition means that you're just not leaving the door wide open while you're testing for that period of time. Oh, this is the slide that I meant to show you earlier, which is there's the source, there's the pathways, and then there's the air pressure and what influences the air pressure. So this slide, so let's pretend that you've hired somebody to test your home. They've used a continuous radon monitor. They've tested for 72 hours, we'll say, and they're going to toss out the first few hours because that's the calibration period of the device. And they're going to then give you this report. And in the report, they're going to say the overall average, which means the time that they turned on the machine to the time they turned it off, the average is 3.6. That's of no consequence for this, okay? You want to use the EPA average. Why did they call it the EPA average? I have no idea. But it's the 48-hour period. And so you want to use this information as in order to make a decision as to whether or not you want to mitigate. And the reason that you do a 48-hour, no less than 48-hour period is because if you only took a few hours, say, in the beginning of this test, you'll see that the average was under 4 picocuries per liter, right? And in some cases, it's down under 1.5. And you see that the radon level is changing hour by hour from between 5:20 p.m. to 4:20 p.m., which was, 2 days later. The reason that it's going up and down, peaks and valleys, is because of me mentioning earlier that the wind impacts the radon level, the changes in the outdoor environment impact the radon level. The changes in temperature also affect the vacuum effect of the building itself. So obviously, if it gets colder or warmer at nighttime and daytime, then you're going to see this fluctuation of radon. Some people choose to buy a device that is a plug-in radon testing device that gives you hour-by-hour readings. And they get terribly excited, meaning alarmed, when they see that their radon level at 2 o'clock or whatever period is 8 picocuries per liter, but another time it may be 0.5 picocuries per liter. Their average could be under 4, but they get terribly excited or alarmed at the 8 picocurie per liter one moment in time. You don't make a decision from that. And for that reason, I choose to suggest to folks to not buy these plug-in devices that may cost $100 or more dollars. You just simply need a test kit to measure the radon level. So these are our recommendations. So if you have radon level that is between 0 and 1.9, you just simply need to retest every 2 to 5 years. Every 2 years if you don't have a mitigation system already in your home, but every 5 years if you have a radon mitigation system, because the fans in the mitigation system are warranted typically for 5 years. If your level is between 2 and 3.9, consider a mitigation system, but if it's 4 or more, highly recommend, strongly recommend a mitigation system. So the intent of a radon mitigation system is really to lower the radon level, right? It is not going to bring it to 0. There's no way to bring the radon level to 0. Most certified mitigators in North Carolina will only guarantee to bring the radon level under 4 picocuries per liter. So the question is, do you want to spend the money? If your radon level is 2.5 or 2.8, whatever that is, it's really up to you as to what your interest is in spending the money to mitigate. When they install the system, or before they install the system, the agreement that you would want to have with a certified mitigator in any state is that they're going to follow the ANSI-ARST standards. Those are the, to my knowledge, the only national standards, consensus-based standards that certified professionals are taught. Now, there are some states that have their own requirements, and that's not bad. It is good. And they all go beyond, or if they are not ANSI-R standards, they are beyond ANSI-R standards. Okay. The fan is always on the outside of the building if they're installing a system in an existing home. But if it's a brand new home, you may end up seeing a fan in the attic itself. So here's what a system may look like for you. So this is a home, obviously, with a basement, and they have chosen in this situation to drill a small hole, like a 5-inch hole, for a 3-inch PVC pipe that, I'm sorry, over here, that's the sump pump. But over here, you're looking at this pipe going into the ground, and it's vacuuming out the radon underneath the home to then discharge it outside. So this pipe is coming up to the surface level, coming out. The fan, which is inverted to serve as a suction, is pushing the radon up and out over the roof line, the eave of the roof. So it's important to get this discharge point up here because I mentioned earlier that radon is 7 times heavier than air. So you don't want it, you don't want it being blown out here, having a pocket of radon that could potentially be where you're grilling or where you're congregating or children are playing or whatever that is going on around your home. So this is just a simplified version of what a system looks like. Here are some other components of what a system could include. Note that this fan is in the attic, so I would envision this system to be a system that was installed in new construction while construction was happening. Okay, so in all systems, you would have a YouTube indicator that's just making sure that you recognize that air is flowing through the tube itself at some level, so pressure's happening. So it's running upwards to where the fan is actually the suction point and discharging again above the roof. So radon is such a consideration in North Carolina and actually all over the United States and around the globe for that matter. But in North Carolina, it's become a priority issue to the point where we have specific recommendations in our North Carolina Cancer Control Plan around radon. 2 years ago, radon became a priority issue in our North Carolina State Health Improvement Plan within the life expectancy category. And then, of course, I've already mentioned what the Real Estate Commission is doing, and they started that back in 2015. Here's the picture of the front cover of our cancer control plan, but inside you'll see that one, it's identifying what the risk is. And then in the preventative actions, we are recommending that all homes, at work sites, and schools be tested for radon, mitigate when necessary, and in communities also understanding that we need to urge employers, school administrators, business leaders to test buildings for radon itself. What this does for me or for the state is it elevates the awareness, it elevates the conversation. So if it's in a state plan, it gives it more oomph for conversations within important circles. Circles above my pay grade, but it just identifies that it's of concern. The same with North Carolina State Health Improvement Plan. We're recommending, or they're recommending, improving access to free test kits. Even though that they're $17, oftentimes that's more than what somebody can afford. And so we work to try to purchase as many test kits as possible and then give them away. And I certainly work to get them into the hands of people who are financially disadvantaged. And then in North Carolina, we actually have systems that if your home has a high radon level and you are a person that meets certain financial or economic criteria that an installation of a radon mitigation system, which can be anywhere between $1,500 to $3,000, can actually be paid for by the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency. So they'll actually take care of that. But we need them to receive more funding. And so that's part of this recommendation. In North Carolina, I wanted to know, am I reaching everybody? That's the point of these surveys. No one required me to do this, but I wanted to know what's the level of awareness in North Carolina. So the first survey was conducted back in 2015. We implemented a number of strategies to elevate awareness. We then were able to get these questions into our state survey in 2019. And I'm going to show you what some of that data reflects. We have just been approved for our questions, the same questions, to be included in the 2025 survey. So I'm constantly trying to measure what's the awareness level. Are there any discrepancies, any disparities within information? So in 2015, that's in blue. 2019, is in green. And the question that was posed was, do you know what radon gas is? Not the best question in the world, but it's a question that's been asked in Washington State and Colorado and others. So I just utilized their question. What we found is that if you're a person of color, you're least likely to know about radon than if you're a white person. So you can see that there was an increase between 2015 and 2019. But among Black males, it increased from 18% or 19%, if you will, up to 36%. Black females from 18% to 38%. But if you look at the white community, white males 30 to 70, white females from 27 to 60, and there was no change in awareness among the Hispanic community. This is terribly alarming to me, has been, and since we did these surveys. And so a lot of what we're doing is focusing on trying to provide information and get information to these communities. We also know that if you own your home, you're more likely to know about radon than if you rent your home. And of course, we have other information that supports this around your income level, your education level, and so forth. So first thing we did was in this past year is we looked at all of our information and we translated it into what's called plain language. Plain language is basically trying to simplify the information in a way that is understandable to everybody. This sheet is actually a basic fact sheet. It's 2 pages. And we had this translated not just into plain language, which is English, but we then had it translated into the 16 most prominent languages in North Carolina. So we hired a consultant, worked with them, got the information translated. Here's, for example, the Spanish version. So it's in Chinese, it's in Hindi, it's in Arabic, it's in Hmong, so forth. We also created a guidance sheet for every county. So using the geology information around groundwater and then also the test of the indoor air test data, we came up with a guidance sheet for every county. And the reason for this is that people call me and they say, I live in this neighborhood, in this city, in this county. What do I need to do? And so everyone needs to test their air. And there are 61 counties where we recommend that you test your well water. So you'll look and see what county you're in. The guidance is in the top right-hand corner. The additional information about what does radon do when drinking high levels of radon in your well water. It may result in stomach cancer. For uranium, which uranium actually has a public health standard, and it can result in kidney damage and cancer. And if it's radium that you're consuming, well water has high levels of radium, it can result in bone cancer. So I deal with just radon and air. So this water information comes from the Occupational and Environmental Epidemiology Office within the Division of Public Health for North Carolina. So we worked with them in the groundwater program to make sure that we had everything correct, as well as the Cancer Control Branch and EPA. Thanks, Mary. There are the public service announcement that I showed you at the very beginning that was in English. We basically took the fact sheet and pulled 3 or 4 different question and answer from that, and then hired the company to then have a native speaker in Cantonese, Chinese, so forth, to read that, if you will. And we created those PSAs. So that's in 7 languages. And then recognizing that American Sign Language needs to also be a part of our translation process. So we now have the full basic fact sheet, which is read in American Sign Language on video, that we also provide for free. Other things that we have, so if it's a real estate guide that you're looking for, buyer's and seller's guide, we have that. If you're looking for guidance on mitigation, we have that. During your real estate transaction, that is, you may consider mitigation. If you are interested in buying a home with a mitigation system, what do you need to be aware of, concerned about? Again, this healthcare provider booklet that was created at a national level, which they're also making available in Spanish. That's also on our website. Radionuclides. So I introduced that word to you. Here's a fact sheet on radionuclides and its relevance to the geology in North Carolina. Uranium, speaking about that. And then a question that's been posed to me a number of times over the past 12 years is, does this affect my dog or cat? So people are concerned, obviously. I know I have 3 critters here at home, 2 dogs that I can't do without. The cat I can do without, but nonetheless, my wife loves her. So the point is we wanted to know, does radon impact our pets? So we worked with North Carolina State University Veterinary Medical School, and they did a literature review. They pulled everything together. We can't necessarily say that lung cancer is the impact from high radon exposure over a lifetime. It's more of the emphysema and fibrosis that are more prevalent and severe in dogs, particularly dogs exposed to secondhand smoke and radon. So more information, more research needs to be done in that area, but we're communicating what we do know. And here's that fact sheet that we have for consumers concerned about pet impact. We have social media pieces. We have these memes or images, if you will, that try to elevate awareness. I'm mentioning all of this, by the way, because these are things that you, if you wanted to include them in your Instagram, your Facebook, whatever you do, right? You can do that. You can share this awareness with others. We do have the geological map. It is more than the fixed images, the county-specific things that I've shared with you. It's actually a geological map that's interactive to show you what rock types exist in certain locales. It's really meant for those who want to seriously geek out on the geology and figure out the state. And again, these fact sheets, I've shown you one of them already. You know, here's Alexander County. We're recommending testing both air and water. In Alamance, which you can see the geology is less than, and so it's testing air. Wake County, where Raleigh is, we're suggesting that you test both indoor air and water. And we work pretty closely with the Wake County groundwater program. In fact, we're actually going to be partnering on a presentation on the 13th of this month. 13th of this month, for environmental health and county health directors in those 61 counties to try to get them to do what Wake County is doing. Those are my slides.
Bye.